Factor each of the polynomials. A, x squared minus 13xy plus 36y squared. I see there's no common factor, so I'm going to start by assuming this looks like the product of two binomials. X squared must come from x times x. Then we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 36 and add up to negative 13. So negative 4 and negative 9 do this. However, this doesn't account for the y squared. So this must come from negative 4y times negative 9y. Let's distribute to check to make sure this works. X times x is x squared. X times negative 9y is minus 9xy. Negative 4y times x is minus 4xy. And negative 4y times negative 9y is positive 36y squared. And then if we combine those middle two terms, those are like terms, we get x squared minus 13xy plus 36y squared. So this does check. That means we had our factorization correct in the first place. B, a to the eighth minus b to the eighth. I see there's no common factor here, so this must look like the product of binomials. Furthermore, we can recognize that this is a difference of squares. So we're going to write this as two sets of parentheses. A to the eighth would be a to the fourth times a to the fourth. As a difference of squares, we know these have to have different signs, plus and minus. And then b to the eighth would be b to the fourth times b to the fourth. Now this first factor is a sum of squares, so this will not factor further. We can leave this as it is. However, a to the fourth minus b to the fourth is another difference of squares, so we can factor this again. So let's leave the first one, a to the fourth plus b to the fourth. The second one, though, I'm going to expand. It's a difference of squares, so this should be a squared times a squared to give us a to the fourth. And then two different signs, plus and minus. And then b to the fourth would be b squared times b squared. Now, a squared plus b squared is a sum of squares, so that won't factor. However, a squared minus b squared is another difference of squares, so we can factor this again. So let's let the first factor sit, a to the fourth plus b to the fourth. The second one also will not factor, so we're going to leave that as a squared plus b squared. Now this last one, a squared minus b squared, we can factor that as a difference of squares, a plus b times a minus b. C, 42x squared minus 24x minus 18. We'd always look for a common factor first, and I see that 6 goes into all three of these numbers. So this becomes 6 on the outside. If we factor 6 out of here, we're left with 7x squared minus 4x minus 3. Now to factor what's in the parentheses, you've got several different options. I'm going to do this by grouping. That's where we take the first times the last. That is, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 21 and that add up to the middle term, the middle coefficient, negative 4. So negative 21, this could be negative 21 times 1, negative 7 times 3, and it looks like those are the only combinations that are going to multiply to negative 21 and have a negative sum. If you add the first pair together, we get negative 20. If we add the second pair together, we get negative 4, which is what we wanted. Negative 7 and negative 3 are the numbers we're looking for. So that is how we'll split up this middle term. So we're going to keep 7x squared. We're going to keep minus 3. But this middle term we're going to break apart as the two numbers we just found. Minus 7x plus 3x. So now we move on to the grouping. We look for a common factor in the first group, and I see that these both have 7x in common. If you factor out 7x, we're left with x minus 1. For the second group, I see that these both have a 3 in common, so we factor out the 3, and we're left with x minus 1. Now we don't want to forget this common factor of 6 that was out in front of the entire problem, so we'll let that one just sit out for now. Next up, our big picture common factor is x minus 1. That means x minus 1 will factor out, And then once that's been factored out, what's left in the parentheses will then be 7x plus 3. Now neither of these has common factors or any more exponents, so we know that this is factored completely. D, ab minus ay minus bx plus xy. This has 4 terms, so we're set to factor this by grouping as it stands. I see that the first group, ab minus ay, these both have an a in common. That's our common factor. If you factor out the a, we're left with b minus y. On the second pair, I see that these two both have an x in common. So we know that x will be the common factor. I'm also going to take out whatever sign this leads with. So I'm going to treat negative x like it's the common factor. So if you take negative x out of the first term, we're left with b. And if you factor negative x out of the second term, we're left with minus y. Now, big picture common factor, these both have a b minus y in common. That means b minus y will come outside. And then once that's been factored out, a minus x is what's left in the parentheses. So this factors into b minus y times a minus x.